Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Hemang Panchal. This is the 10th webinar exploring the functionality of Powerproject. Previous webinars are on Solid Support website, where you will also find information on Powerproject online training courses. Remember that Solid Support can help with your Powerproject setup, templates, and code libraries. We are once again lucky to have Chris Ray with us from Alicosoft to conduct today's session. So over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Hemang. Right, okay. Yeah, so there's Hemang from Solid Support and myself, Chris Ray from Alicosoft. Before we get started into today's session, I'd like to thank you all for joining, but also give you some little bit of housekeeping rules here. You are all muted, so we won't be able to hear you. You have a dialogue on the side of your screen which you can minimize across, but there's also a question section. So if you have any questions as you go through, just let us know and they'll pop up on our screen. We'll either answer them during the session or at the end of the session. So that's that side of it. This session is being recorded and will be available to you afterwards. I think it's about an hour or 2 hours after the meeting. You'll get a email from us with a link of the recording attached to it. So you can click on there and you can also circulate it to colleagues if you need to. And they will just need to type in their registration details to register, and then they can watch the video as well. So moving on from here, hopefully everyone can hear me. Going to here, we're going to look at Powerproject formulas, or we should say is in what are Powerproject formulae in there, as we do want to use the proper terms for it, but it's the formulas that you can use inside Powerproject. Now, if you are Powerproject users, you may or may not be aware that you have formulas inside Powerproject that you can write your own. We do provide a whole range of sample ones that you can use, but we also you can also tailor and create your own formulas in there, which again can be a little bit overwhelming. So we're going to go through what formulas are, the very basics of them, what fields we can use, you can use in there. Then we're going to look at some of the basics about creating formulas, and then examples, and actually get into Powerproject and see it in real life. So the first one is what are Powerproject formulas? And if you're inside the Powerproject help and you look at that, you get this lovely lot of text in there telling you what formulas are. But in basic terms, a formula in Powerproject allows you to take one field or one value and do something with it or check against it to define something else out in a column inside the spreadsheet. And we're going to look at that and look at the different options in there. And it's really, there is endless potential with this, but we're going to go with the basics first and so forth. So the first question is, what fields can you actually use in formulas inside Powerproject? Well, the answer is that pretty much any of the columns that you see inside Powerproject at the moment can be used in a formula, which means any column in Powerproject can be used to calculate something else if you wanted to. So you can use it to find out dates and then subtract other dates from it. So you could take away today's date from a start date to know how many days away that is. You could take durations and work out what the percentage of the overall project duration that is in there, or a cost. Any of those can be used inside here. So, and we'll look and explore how these can be used inside Powerproject as well. So first of all, we're going to look at some of just the basics of formulas. And so when we talk about formulas, a lot of people think about the formulas you get in Excel, and they're similar, but they're not Excel formulas. They're different because Excel is a different package. But some of the concepts are the same, the subtractions and pluses and multiplies and divides, they all work with it as well. And what formulas do allow you to do, one thing you can do is you can actually convert cost, durations, effort values into just numbers. So if you think about inside Powerproject, if you saw a duration of 1D or 10 days, that's actually a duration of 10 days. And if you try to do something with that, you're still dealing with a duration. So you may at some point want to convert the 10 days into 10 as a number, which you could then do something with in a different formula. So in a formula. So example formula here is duration divided by 1 day with a little apostrophes next to it will actually convert the 10-day the 10D into just 10. You could then do something with that, and that's just a number you're doing there. The same thing is you could take a number and multiply it by 1D, and it would convert it into a duration, which means if you convert it to a duration, if you format that column in with your format cells, you could format it to weeks or minutes or seconds, because it just sees it as a duration field, or in that field. It doesn't affect the actual task duration, it's just a duration, a column showing a duration field. And the same thing is with cost. If you've got, again, depending on your currency unit you've got set up, you've got dollars, divide the cost by $1, it will convert $1,000 into 1,000 as a number, and you can then use that. So that's really quite useful to be aware of what you can do with that. And we'll look at that as we go through. You can also use if statements. So if you've done Excel, you know you have the if statements. And again, here we're saying if X equals Y, and then you've got a statement there which says if true, do this, if not true, do that. So when you do an if statement, it's going to either be true or false, and you can provide either of those. You also have, you can say if the duration equals 10D, then the response would be the task is 10 days long. Or if it's not 10 days long, it would say the task is not 10 days long. Again, and that would be a valid formula inside Powerproject. You have the validation here, and then the true and the false response from there. So the only thing to be aware of is if with formulas, if you do an if, that the response you return for being true or false are the same type of field. So I'm providing a string here, some text, so both of them have to be text. If I provided a number, both of them would have to be a number in that sense. For those who get fairly detailed into Excel, you can have nested ifs, so you can have an if within an if you wanted to there. So you can see here, if X equals Y, then if that's true, we do another if. And so we can do nested ifs if we wanted to. But you could also use one option here, which is different to Excel, is a switch. So we say here, we say switch, and you say A equals B, and it only has one result. If it's true, that's what it responds. It'll say A equals B, A equals C, A equals C, A equals D, and so forth. It'll just return one. But we'll look at this as we go through. But that's just a very quick overview of some basics inside here. What the next thing we'll do is we're actually going to get into Powerproject and actually see this in action. And for the purposes of this web session today, we're just going to literally create a new project. I'm going to choose the standard construction template is standard template in there, so nothing pre-created for this. It's just going to be straightforward using Powerproject as it comes out of the box. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a couple of tasks in here just to have something to start with. And we've got some durations. I'm not worried about what they are. And I'm going to add myself my first formula. So I'm just going to go down to, now you can't actually add a new formula by the add column because it's only existing formulas. These are some of the default ones that come with the construction template. I just go to table definition, come up with the table definition properties, and I'm going to choose the finish date down here, and just rather than have a finish date, I'm going to have a new formula. So it comes up with a new formula dialog. Now, the first thing to be aware of is the actual formula name. This is going to be a unique name. So like duration is already a column, you couldn't have duration there, but I'm going to have sample formula 1, just to give something different in there. And I'm going to now, I can now start typing away at my formula if I wanted to. Now, when you're constructing a formula, you've got 4 different selections at the bottom. You've got symbols, function, field, and object. We're only going to first of all concentrate on field. So if I click on field, it will give me a list of all the columns that I get normally in my table definition that I can use. And then inside here, I'm going to literally go down and I'm going to say, if I choose date and I choose duration and I click on that duration, it comes up on screen with the select object and parameters field. Now, this is important here is because we've got default object, allocation task, bar, summary, chart, project, program. Now, before I go any further, okay, there is nothing in there at the moment. So let's just talk about what those are. So we have the default object would be whatever line you're looking at. But if I have this project here and I summarized it here, if I said summary, it would take the information from here. So an interesting formula you could say is, what's the duration of the task divided by the duration of the summary to give you the percentage equivalent of that task? If I had cost, what's the cost value of this task compared to the cost value of the overall summary? If I had project, that's where you have the items here that says is a project. So it would go, and that might be above this level here. And program is the whole thing. So if I have multiple projects in there, the program is the program of the whole project, so the actual file. So I can get information off all of those, and we'll have a brief look at that as we go through. The allocation is if I had, for example, let me just assign a resource here. That is the allocation. So if it would take the values from the allocation itself. So just going back to my table definition. So this is one thing, first of all, just a side note, that will catch you up when you're doing formulas in Powerproject. You go to edit your formula that you've already created, and I click here, and my formula will be shown here, and I'll click in there, and I'll try and type, and nothing will happen because I need to click on the edit formula to get it instead. So now if I go back to this, and I go to date, and I go to duration, there's my allocation task. Bar is the whole line with each in there, summary, chart, if that's an expanded task, project and program. So I'm going to leave it, and most times you leave it on the default option there. You then have other options in here, and at the moment on duration, I have an option to choose, is the information coming from a project or one of the baselines, just like you do inside Powerproject itself when you add in the duration column. I'm going to leave it as the default project or baseline value, depending what line I'm looking at. It's got parameters here, and I could select this, but I'm not going to select any of that. I'm going to click on OK, and it's, after all that effort, it's put the word duration in. We could have typed that, and you can just type it. It doesn't have to be capitalized. It could type it, but this is a very simple one in there. If I wanted to know what the summary duration was, I could just put a date in there, put duration, and if I chose summary this time, it would be summary dot. And again, you could type that. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to click on OK. Click on close. Remember, you've got an apply and a close here. Close will apply and close the dialog at the same time. And there I have my column for my duration, which I've called sample formula 1 at this point. Now, it might seem strange that I've gone to all that effort and I've just typed in duration. But the advantage here is this duration is not editable. So you could actually add columns in just to make those columns read-only so people can't change them. So there may be only certain fields you'd want people to change, which means it becomes really useful to create a table that people can't edit, but can edit certain fields. And you can rename, and again, if I go back into table definition, I could rename that duration, and it would appear as duration in there. I'm not going to do that at this point, so we're going to play with it. So I put that in there, and I've got my formula there. And again, as you see here, I can click it. It looks like I've got the cursor, but I can't actually type. I have to go back into this one. You can set categories up as well. We're not going to come into that. So I've got duration here. And what I want to do is I want to say, well, if I take the duration and I divide that by 1 day, putting the apostrophes in there as well. Click on OK, close. Now it's converted that in 37 hours to 37. So if I wanted to use that in a formula and do something with that, I could actually do that. If I go back into my formulas for agreement in there, edit that formula, I've put my formula in there, and if I then wanted to, for example, I could take that formula now in there, and I could put brackets around it. So I put my brackets or parentheses, whichever you want to call them, in there. I've now there, and I could now do something else with that, so times 2. Notice when I change something in here, you've got a status down here that tells you if what you've just done is correct or isn't correct. So, and it'll tell you the status. If it says OK, it means that formula will run. Not saying it's going to give you a result, but it is a valid formula you've typed in there. And I click on OK, close again, and it goes there. So it's now doubled up those values. If I wanted to work out what 10% was, I could multiply it by 0.9 or 0.1 to work out 10% and so forth. So I can work on my formulas to do this information, to show this information, and I can do different things. Just see if there's a question there. I'll come back to that question in a moment in there. So in here, once we've got our, I'm going to get rid of this in here. And once I've got my, remove this duration here, I'm now going to put another formula in, and I'm going to do an if statement. So in here, I'm going to choose to put an if statement. So I'm going to say if, open brackets there, and notice at the moment it's got a little red underline where it thinks there's a problem, and it's trying to give me a hint to what the problem is. So I say, if I say if duration, because I can just type it, I could choose it for the fields. I say is greater than, and let's say 10D, and then put a comma. So that's my check, what if it's true or false. And I can say, and my response is long task or short task, and then close brackets. Oops. There we go. So that's done a quick check. Click on OK, close. It's done that. And as I reduce the task down, you can see here it's updating as you go. And that's a very simple task there. But there, as soon as I goes over, it shows. And that's just, and if I go back into that, it's giving me a response, a long task or short task. So it can be whatever you want, but you can use this to validate and check your program if you wanted to in different parts of your project to do checks on it. So I've got now if duration is there, long or short. But if I get rid of those options in there, and rather than saying, I say if it's greater than 10 days, I'm going to say high or low. Now high and low is part of a traffic light, red, amber, green system. So high is red, low is green, medium is amber. So if I now click on that, I'm just going to center that now to make it look a bit more presentable. You can see now it gives me the red, amber, or green, and so I switch between there. And I'm doing a check here against a duration, but I could be doing a check about the difference between date or something like that, or a value, or going over a baseline point or a key date or something like that. So you can simply and easily check and validate against anything in here. Now, I've put this in here. If I say this is an if, so it's one check and 2 answers, a yes or a no. But I could use switch, open there and say duration equals, or say duration less than 10D, and then go and I say low, comma, duration greater than 10D, and I say high. So I've done a check there, but it's doing a check. It's saying if the duration is less than 10 days or if it's higher than 10 days, but I could have multiple ones inside there. So if I do that, still has the same thing, but it's now checking for the differences between those. Now, I'll just go back to there again. A little hint here and a little, this is starting to look one line, but you can imagine if I had a lot of things in there, it would get messy. The advantage inside in here with formulas is that you don't have to have it like that. So I can press enter. So I can say that is my formula. Doesn't matter about those line returns and me pressing return at the end of those. So I now can say if duration is there, it's low. If duration is greater than that, it's high. What it does is as it goes through these checks, and you can have as many of them as you want, the one it hits and is valid, it stops and doesn't check any further. So you need the ones that's going to hit the first, like the ones to be the first and least and so forth. You can play around with that, and I'll talk about that. But that allows you to do those checks, and it responds with that, like that, and as you can see. Now, what I would say here is, if I was going to write this as straight off, and I know I did just write it as a straight off, but I always recommend, and we recommend that when you use formulas, always start off simple. And if you looked at a formula like this, what I would do is I would look at, first of all, I would look at each part and see if it's valid. So I might try one in an if, but even with these fields here, if I don't know what result I'm going to get, I would actually, before I write the whole thing, I would actually say in here, if I edit that, see there's my mistake there, highlight that. And I say, I'll check duration works first. And what does that give me? Okay, that gives me that. Then I go into in here and I edit that formula, and then I could start expanding on it. So try each part of the formula. The worst thing that we see people do is they create a massive formula like this and don't validate, they just type it straight without actually validating if it works or not, or each part works. And you'll spend forever trying to diagnose. And I would say that when you get to formulas, it's not something support will necessarily help you with there, because you're writing your own formulas, which can be as complex as you want. So it's not something that's like a standard support aside. You're writing your own code as such inside here. But we can do other things inside here as well. So if I just come out of here, I've got nothing in there at the moment. If I take this task over here, and I go to my code libraries, and I go to my build stages, and that's not build stages, let's use trades. And I say, out of my trade contractors, I assign a trade contractor there, a trade contractor there. Now I can add a column in, but if I go down to codes and choose task.trades, task.trade contractors, it will show me who that trade contractors are in there. But in my formula, if I go to table definition, I can actually click in here and then go to field, codes, task.trade contractor. For the default allocation for the project, same settings as before. And that, if I click on OK and close, does exactly the same thing, but this one I can change, this one I can't. If I go back to here and edit that, you can see that actually this number 35 is actually the actual ID of the trade contractor code library. So everything in Powerproject has an internal ID. But if you didn't know what the ID was, and again, you can choose it through field, so it's fine, but you could call it, you could actually put the name in there of the trade contractor if it exists in there. Let's undo that for a moment. Come back to that moment with a different one. So that's in there. So I do that. Okay. if I actually wanted to do an if on that, so I could say if trade contractor, the task trade contractor equals, and then I call it, let's call it Nigel's plumbing, then I could say hi, hello, hi. So now that's only going to, so whenever I draw a task and I assign Nigel's plumbing to that, it will go green. If I assign something different, it does that. But again, the basis of what I've done there is that what I'm saying there is that thing that says there could be that the high or low, so the low part could be doing something else and doing a calculation in there. Now, if I wanted to do a switch on this, so to do multiple things, so I could do switch and then do that equals that, and I can say that Nigel, comma, and then I could do another one in there. But I would say instead of Nigel, I could call that, let's say, HG demolition, and I could say that was demo. And you can now see it's using that to pick out other stuff and do something else with it. So it's quite powerful the way that you can start to get it to search. Like there are actual ways you can search for pieces of text inside there. Now, what I can do is every time I'm writing here, I'm writing this bit of formula here every time. So what you can do, if you're going to use the same, and that's quite small, but it could be quite a long thing you have to repeat every time. So you can actually say let CL equals, and I actually do that, and actually, so I'm creating a variable in here called CL, and then inside here, I can just say that's going to be CL, so I can reference my variable. A little bit nerdy programmer side there, but it means much smaller, much easier ones, and it does the same thing as before. So you can see you can start to build up quite a formula with things as you go. Now, if I just get rid of that, other things you can put into here. So for example, if I look under symbol, we have things like variable dates. So you may or may not be aware that Powerproject has variable dates and different selectors. And those variable dates mean they interact with the time on your and date on your machine. So for example, here is that we've got this, if I said today, that's going to put today's date, the 26th of May. Tomorrow is 27th, current progress period date. So if I chose that, put that in there, then if I clicked on close, in my formula, it's going to give me a column that says the current progress period date, which is great. But also, I can, because that's there, if I just get rid of that for a moment, if I use a function and I say dates and duration, now I could actually just say, you know, if I said the start minus the current progress period date, that's going to tell me the difference between the start date and the current progress period date, which I could then do something else with if I wanted to. I could do that could be a calculation. I could check if it's over or under certain dates. If I use the resume date, that's the progress, that's the part complete date. So I could do that. So you can just, hopefully you can see there's quite powerful what you can do in here. And so in that side of it. And if I go into here, and if I just get rid of that, so you have your variable dates. You will also have enumerated values inside here, so like constraints, so you can pick up and see if something's a particular type of flag or ALAP, ASP, and so these are all predefined fields that you can use. And you've got your baseline reference, which is live project, current baseline, or project baseline. And those ones there are the same as when you're inside here, you've got those in there. So they're the same ones you can use. In there. So that's your functions, your arithmetic ones. You can type those in comparisons and equals and nots and so forth. If I look at my functions, this is where it gets quite interesting, is because you can do rounding up. So you can round something, a number, rather than giving you decimal places. You can truncate the number of decimal places. In there, you can do text. So you can find the length of a text. You can search some text in there. So if I wanted to, if I close on here, if I added a notes column in here, oops, just bring this open here, and I say in here that the notes in here are happy, sad, for example, and in there, if I edit that formula, I can say you've got these functions in here for text where you can search or find text. When you click on there, I can say what I want to find, and that might be happy within what text, and I want to find that within the notes, and I say field identify notes in there, and that says whether it's found it or not. And if I say this is a happy task, it's showing me the position of the happy where it is inside there. If I go back to there and say, oops, I'm doing the same thing myself, search, it does the same thing, using the same thing. Same thing, find or search works the same way in there. But you can see that you can search that, so you could actually search the summary title for or the project name for something if you wanted to. That's some functions you can do with there. You can do mathematical ones, so you can convert text to values and values to text. So the thing to understand is that not always when you see a value inside here, it's actually a value. It might be a piece of text, so you can't do a calculation with it, so you can convert that. So the example would be is if you had a user-defined field that was a string and someone typed a number 3 into it, it looks like a number 3, but it's actually a 3, it's a string, or a piece of it's actually doesn't see as a number, but you could convert it using value to switch it into there. You've also got error handling, so we can move on to quite interesting things in here. And if I'm just going to go to error handling, show you, you get a try expression and alternative. So I can say here, try duration divided by 10. But if for any reason there was a problem with that and it couldn't do it, I could say, well, just put 0 in there. So that's the alternate. So you're basically trying something, and if it doesn't work, you're giving it an alternative. You try to do something in there, and then if that doesn't work, it will error out, and you can capture that error inside there. So, and we'll see that in one of the examples in a moment, the standard ones inside there. So the other one to show is, and again, here if I do that again, let's just show you. If I go to code library, past a contractor, we've already seen this one in here. So if I click on that, that's going to respond and return to me the code library that I had. But actually, what we can do is I can go back into there, and if I put in there int for integer, that's returning the ID of that. And if I just went into Powerproject's Library Explorer, I went into Code Library, I went into Trade Contractors in here, and I added a field for object ID. Those are the unique object IDs for each of these items in here. That's now displaying those object IDs, which is read-only inside there. So it's a very quick and easy way to do that. If we then go into here again, we look at this. Okay, so someone's asking how you could use it to calculate the contingency of a task. So to give that as an example, if we said the duration of a task divided by, and I think you say 12.5% there. So actually, if I multiply by that 0.1125 in there, that's now working out of that period there. So if I say that is 10 days, oops, it gives me that. And if I format that cells as a duration and days and as decimal, 1.25 days. The 10-day task, 1.25 days, which is really useful because it's always going to work out 12.5% of that in there. Can everyone still hear me? Someone's just said the sound's gone quiet or disappeared. Amang, I don't know if you can confirm if you can still hear me.
Hear you. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, just want to say someone has mentioned that. So the other thing in here, that's really useful that we can see that gives us 12.5% of that duration. But what would be really useful is if I just save my project and I go into my user fields, and let's just say for this purposes, I add a bar column called a bar user field, which will be an integer, for example, that's going to say the contingency. And now I add a column in here under user fields called contingency. And let's just put, I used integer, you would use float actually if you wanted to have decimal places, but let's just use that one in there. Now inside here, I've got this and I can say, okay, well, if that's 10%, then what I can do is I could edit that formula. And rather than doing that, I can say, well, if I, and this is where you might want to, I can say duration divided by 1 day. So now it gives me a number. And I could divide that by 100 and multiply that by, and then I use my field, user fields, contingency. So, I click OK. There's my 10 there. And if I type into here and I say this is 20, automatically this is changing. And if I go into the table definition and I then just say, put brackets around the beginning and the end of that and multiply that by 1 day. Now, if I say 50%, it works out as 5 days. So automatically, whatever I'm typing in here, so if I'm typing in 15 days, it automatically works out. So taking your example there, it allows you to use that on there. Someone's asked if there is a way of disabling formulas on certain tasks. There's no way you can actually straightforward do it, but you can do it in the formula. So you could assign a code to a task to say enable formula or disable formula. You could do a check to see if that formula is on that task. And if it is, if that if statement is true, you then perform the formula. So you can do that in those different ways. If I show you here, if I just add a column in, it'll show you here that some of the existing ones we've got inside here. And if I go down here to finish variance rag, red, amber, green, this is an example you get in here that we're doing a try and then we do a switch. So we're going to say if the finished variance from the current baseline is greater than or equal to 0D, then it goes low, which is green. And if it doesn't meet that, it goes to the next statement, says if finished variance for the current baseline is greater than -3 days, it's medium, and then finished variance for the current baseline is -5, then it goes high inside there. And then you've got the true and high is the if for the try side and the error check inside. But it means that this now, and again, I could edit this formula and it would be to set whatever various values I wanted to set it to in there. The only thing to be aware of is that if I added that formula twice, it is only one formula. So if I edited it in here and said that was, let's say, 6 days inside there, and again, remember your negatives and positives for variances. So depending on which way it goes, the task is ahead or behind. But if I do 6 days there and close on that, they are both now 6 days because I've edited that one formula that's being used on both columns. So someone's asked if you can put a formulate the total cost per activity using the unit cost per activity. Again, if it's as long as it's fields you can get to inside here, you can add in here, then yes, you can do a formula on it. And that's one of the key things here is it just becomes something you can do very easily in there, as long as you can get to those values inside the formulas. You can see those in there. You can see them inside. Now the only, not with the one you were asking there, but just to be aware of some of the things there. If I go into some of these columns, if I go into my table definition, when you look at some columns in here, they have a few options inside here. But if I add a different one in here, for example, using, let's look at cost, just as a cost field. Do you notice in here, in cost, when I choose cost, I can choose the cost center, rolled up or direct, override currency and so forth in there, and cost type. Well, if I'm looking in a formula and I edit that formula, and if I put a cost in there, notice I get the same thing. So I get my baseline, I get my cost center I can choose. Is it directly allocated? I can choose dates. And the interesting thing here is with the dates, if I choose 2 dates in there, that's hard set 2 dates, but I could actually replace that date there with a variable date, which could be week start or month start, and it could be to month end or weekend. And now every time I look at that column, it will show me the current cost for the current week I'm in. And if I wanted to get really fancy about that, I could say to the weekend, if I want to go week start minus 14 days and stuff like that. Oops, I need to put that into there. And so that's 2 weeks from this before the week started. So I'm now got 3-week value if I wanted to. So you can really play around with this and set it up, but do it bit by bit, build it up, test it with other columns if you want to work on it to show that how it looks. So someone's asking about progress fields and referencing the current progress period. One of the advantages is one of the options you have here in enumerator values, variable dates, is current progress period date. So you could always use that. If you're using a particular field that has a progress field, let's say actual duration in there, you've got there, you can choose progress entry period in there. If I just choose that, and then progress entry period in there, but I could also choose current progress date and stuff like that. So it allows you to choose that and have that flexibility, especially for the current baseline, the current progress period date and so forth, because they're known inside there. Now, again, not what we're doing today, but just to be aware of what you can do is that you can set all these fields up and these formulas up inside here to show you. I can have that set up there that's doing a particular calculation for me in my project. And one of the things that we've got inside Powerproject is business intelligence reporting. So it's something that's available as an add-on module. There is some export to Excel from within inside Powerproject. But that allows you to create dashboards using different dashboards tools and so forth like that. These formulas you see here can be added to that schema of data. So for example, this contingency, which is something otherwise in other systems may ask you, may not be able to do it, or may have to use calculations inside the dashboard side. Here you could have an actual field that goes out straight to a report called contingency, and it gives you a duration in there. And then with that information, you can then build upon that to create different dashboards inside here. So this is just a sample dashboard, and we're just using a reporting tool called Microsoft Power BI. But again, the fields, every field you see here is actually a formula that's been exported from the project, and then you can get to data and so forth. So you start off using formulas in Powerproject, but you can move from that to create other reports and other ways of exporting data out and seeing data. But the fact is, it's so flexible to allow you to use formulas as part of that export. So just checking other questions. So then that one, just checking. So one of the questions has been asked about dates. Let's just test this. One of the questions here is if I open up Excel. The screen. So if I have this in here, I think the question is if I copy the dates from there in there to here, it puts the dates in and you've got the times inside there. And if I had a table definition in here now, I know what you're after is it removing that time. I think it won't do that. We'll just let's go this folder here and just put starting there. If I go to my formula, just copying that. It still gives it that information, unfortunately. The only thing you would have to do is inside here, you'd just set that to short date, like so. But that's something maybe I would recommend, Gary, just to raise that as a change request. There has been talk about it as well. And that's for everybody to be aware that we do have, if there's a feature you would like in the software, not guaranteeing it, but if you do raise it as a change request, we will know about it, and more people ask for it, more likely it will appear. And that's what actually you get a lot in the new releases, is features that people have asked for and multiple people have asked for, and we've added them into the system. So do ask if you have any of those. Anyway, I think that's all the questions. If you do have any further questions, you can always contact Solid Support about anything in there. This video will be available. Hopefully this has been of use to you and given you an insight to what you do. You could, yes, it's unfortunately the start cell. Someone's asked about changing the start cell in there. The format of that cell of a date is actually, it has that time behind it. So when you copy it, it copies the time in the background. So that's one thing, but it is something. There was I know that because it used to happen when sorting. So if you actually ever wrote a sort, I went to sort new, just as a side note, this is, if I wanted to sort everything by task, start date, it used to, and I used to put a heading on it, for example, like that, and just say this. See, it put the date in there and the time and stuff like that. But now we added the option, because of request by people, if people want to see it by week or month or day. If I said by week, it just puts the date in there. If I sort from property and see it by month, it would handle that. So there are different ways it now can do stuff. So anyway, so hopefully that's been of use. If you have any other questions, do let us know. Thank you for your attendance, and you'll get an email from us with a link to this video. And thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you all.